There's like 9 million things that are going to happen in this episode, so be ready for that. Should also be ready for Brandon Knight, who is going to be back this upcoming season from his lower body injury, which means that thing I was talking about before about Darren Collison, all that's gone. Darren Collison's not going to be on this team because Brandon Knight is going to be one of our point guards. I guess Collison could possibly be on the team, but probably not. And also, shout out to everybody in the comments who reminded me that the Lakers pick, because it fell number 3, will be going to the Celtics as a part of the Jason Tatum trade that they made with the Sixers, and that very confusing draft pick that was originally traded from the Lakers for Steve Nash like 6 years ago. So the Celtics will now have the 3rd pick in the draft, and the Lakers have nothing. They don't have a pick. So there's that for you. And speaking of the 76ers, I didn't speak of them at all, but they are implied in that trade. Let's do a little update on Markelle Fultz, just because with how crazy of a thing that is, I attempted to have that affect the game somewhat. By that I mean I lowered his shooting attributes. Not too crazy, they're like low 70s. And one of the contested ones might be like in like the high 60s. His 3-point shot is not exactly going in at the moment. And his free throws, those aren't going in. Those weren't going in before I even touched him. And the 73 overall, I mean, look, his shooting was a very big deal for why he was so coveted out of college. Next, we have to talk about the head coach situation in the NBA. Now, Mike D'Antoni is actually technically available, but there's no way in hell that he is not going to be on the Houston Rockets past this season. So I actually took control of the Rockets for like 2 minutes and made sure that he signed there. I just offered him the contract to Houston, and nobody else made any offers to him. Now, as far as our head coach situation, there is Steve Clifford, who I think is not a bad coach, but I don't know if he's perfect for us. Let's look at what he's done with the Hornets. He does some things I like. He runs a lot of pick and rolls, and the Hornets have actually been towards the top of the league the past couple years in terms of 3-point attempts. I know the last 2 years before this one, they were like top 10 or whatever. However, Clifford, I don't know if he's the type of guy to coach a young team. I mean, he's barely playing Malik Monk. So he might just get cranky if we signed him, which is not a thing in a video game, but whatever. There's also David Fizdale, though, and I'm thinking more and more about him on this Phoenix Suns team. And if we look at the situation he entered with Memphis, it was a team that was slower. They liked to post up. They liked the grit and grind style of basketball. And I think Fizdale did a good job of getting them to the modern day NBA. One thing he made sure of was to give Mike Conley like the first 6 seconds of every possession. So he's down for point guards doing stuff, which I enjoy quite a lot. And he also started JaMychal Green over Zach Randolph to get them more of an athlete and a perimeter dude at the power forward position. And Fizdale, he's a good coach, okay? So we're throwing an offer at him, and we got him. So shout out to us. And shout out to nobody else because they didn't sign him. And now you may notice that he has a C in potential. I think 2K might be underrating Fizdale a bit there, as well as overrating some of the other guys who are available. JB Bickerstaff not being awful is an interesting one, for one. Jason Kidd's also, like, not horrible. Whatever. I might bump up Fizdale's potential a little bit. Not to the point of, like, an A where we'd be basically cheating, but, you know, up to, like, a B+. I think that's fair for David Fizdale. Maybe just a solid B. We'll agree on a B. We talk about the deeper part of this video, which is our number 4 pick, which I'm still salty about. But there's not much I can really do about it at this point, right? So, remember, number 3 is the Celtics, so just act like that's the Celtics logo and not the Lakers one. But we talk about the first 2 picks, and we can talk about like who I think is going to be selected by Atlanta and selected by Chicago. I think it's safe to say that Marvin Bagley is going to get picked by one of those teams. Here he's in a Hawks jersey, but he could get selected number 1 overall. Funny thing with Bagley is his defense has actually been kind of bad in real life. And then DeAndre Ayton's probably going to go. I mean, Chicago wants him, of course. That's pretty well documented. At least it is on Twitter. But I assume those 2 are going to go number 1 and 2, and we're not going to see either one of them. And I actually think Michael Porter is going to get drafted number 3 to the Celtics, and then he can join their onslaught of small forwards and they can just have like every player on the team be like above 6'8", besides Marcus Smart and Kyrie Irving. We got to talk about our situation. Trae Young is a name that I brought up first episode, and I think from an offensive standpoint, there are many things that Trae Young could do for us. As a three-point shooter, he is what you'd want in today's league, right? Contested threes, pull-up threes, of course open threes if you're fortunate enough to get them open. And I think the offense that we could build with him and Devin Booker could really be something that could be potentially devastating for opposing defenses as long as we were able to put more than those two out there in terms of shooting. We'll talk about it. Of course, they both have skills on the ball, but I think when we have them moving off the ball is when we could really freak some teams out. Because, I mean, Trae Young will definitely be in sets that can get him open threes with someone else handling the ball. Devin Booker has already been doing that for us anyway, and I feel like that can be pretty similar to what the Warriors have with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, where you just get both of those guys moving off ball, and it just kind of freaks out the opposing team. I mean, it's tough to defend that because the amount of gravity that someone like Trae Young and Devin Booker will have by simply existing. So that could really be something. And with teams like Houston and Golden State and Denver and whoever the hell else, you need a really impressive offense if you want to win. Also, we have Troy Daniels, who is someone who could play with those two, and suddenly we have 3 knockdown shooters on the floor. Trae Young can also make plays just for teammates. I don't picture him being a huge playmaker, but a solid one enough, can make the simple plays, and he'll probably be our best passer on the team if we select him. He should make some of our bigs better. Of course, the defense is going to have to care about Trae Young and pick and rolls, which can open up more opportunities for Dragan Bender and the like. But there is a risk with him as well, and that is on defense. He's a small dude. He's like 6'2", 180, 190, around there, something. And there are times when he could just get out-physicaled against opposing point guards and whoever he ends up defending. You can put in as much effort as possible, but if you don't have the body to play defense, it can be tough. This would put some pressure on Josh Jackson, 1, to be a starter pretty much right away, but number 2, to become a lockdown defender for us, which I think he has the potential to do, but if we select Trae Young, then Josh Jackson better become a lockdown defender. Devin Booker is not the best defender in the world either. He would have to see some improvement. It is possible that selecting Trae Young would give us maybe the worst defense in terms of the backcourt in the league. Trae Young would have to defend spot shooters. I don't know how J.J. Redick ended up on the Spurs here, but he would have to defend like the worst of the point guard through small forward on the other team. And that can work against some teams. It can be rough against others. And I think this could actually create a problem for T.J. Warren, just because we may not be able to afford to have too many like average to negative defenders out there if we already have Trae Young. We would also need to get a center who can really make up for Trae Young potentially having problems. So there are things we would have to do on the back end if we selected the guy. But from an offensive standpoint, the potential is limitless, right? And all we can hope for with Trae Young is that he would basically become Steph Curry on defense. They have very similar physical profiles, wingspan, height, weight, and all that. Curry's grown into a good defender. Can Trae Young do the same thing? I don't know. Even then, Curry has a lot of help. So, yeah. Next, we look at Michael Porter Jr., who I mentioned a second ago. I do think will be drafted by the Celtics. That's just me guessing. He totally could not be. And because there is a little bit of doubt in my mind, I think it's still worth talking about him in case he is available at number 4 for us. Now, the comparison he's gotten is kind of like Kevin Durant or a more athletic Joe Johnson if he doesn't get to that level of player. Dude's going to put up points. He's going to make a lot of shots. Isolations, three-pointers, play in the power forward position. It would give us another guy who can play power forward because we have quite a few of those now. I mentioned TJ Warren a moment ago. If we drafted Michael Porter, TJ Warren might be out because at that point it's like, well, I don't really need another scoring wing who needs the ball in his hand like that and isn't much on defense and playmaking. But whatever. it'd be worth it for Michael Porter. And maybe there's a chance TJ Warren would not be pushed out of the rotation. I don't know. But the big thing here with Porter over Trae Young, potentially, I think is that Porter can be a pretty okay defensive player. I don't see anything in terms of scouting that would say he can be like a lockdown guy or anything like that, but just given that he moves along the floor pretty well and he's like 6'10", he's going to have a better chance than someone who's 6'2", right? And that could give us some pretty okay switch ability between a few positions, and say if Michael Porter grew to be pretty okay and then Josh Jackson becomes what we hope he can be, then you could really be something in terms of a team who can stop opposing wings. So it's an interesting conversation to have between Porter and Trae Young. Now if we get to Luka Doncic. So my fear with Doncic is mainly from the lack of athleticism, because there's a lot of things he does well, okay? He can beat some guys off the dribble sometimes. He can play in the pick and roll. He can make plays for his teammates. He can hit open threes. He can hit some contested threes and all that. But the lack of athleticism makes me think he can't beat guys off the dribble that consistently. On top of his defense could be a problem, which is similar to Trae Young, but the difference here between him and Young is I see a lot of CJ McCollum with Luka Doncic in the sense of high teens, low 20s, potentially even mid 20s as a scorer, mainly through craftiness and all that. But you wouldn't consider CJ McCollum an elite player, right? A very good one, no doubt, but definitely not elite. And that would be the difference between Doncic and Trae Young, is that Trae Young might be an elite offensive player for us, given the spacing and the shooting he can provide. I feel like Doncic could just be very good, and very good is fine. But when you have a choice between the two, obviously you know what you're going to pick. Now, I should at least talk about Mo Bamba a little bit. I mean, defensively, like I've been talking about defense throughout this entire video, he's going to be the best defender out of everybody I've mentioned in this thing. That includes Bagley and DeAndre Ayton. But the thing is, one, it's easier to find a good defensive five than it is to find like a really, really good offensive point guard or whatever. But the other thing is, I don't think you can really waste an opportunity to get someone who could potentially be a high 20 scorer in Michael Porter, Trae Young. I mean, if we had another young star next to Booker, I'd consider Mo Bamba, but because we don't, I just don't know if that's right for us. I'm going to do a straw poll. You can find it in the description. You can find it in the top comments left by myself. Point blank. Who do we pick? Trae Young, Michael Porter, Luka Doncic. I'll put Mo Bamba in there for the sake of it. I really don't mind which one we pick. Also, no Colin Sexton, because I'm tired of point guards that can't shoot. Anyway, new podcast, also in the description, is James Harden playing too many minutes, and then I reminisce about Call of Duty, because who doesn't love that?